If you press skip intro when you watch this show, you shouldn't be watching this show. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss the first 4 episodes of X-Men 97. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and joining me today in the co-host chair is my lovely wife, Bethany Wells. Again, greatest theme song according to this podcast. Yes, we did a bracket a while back. Not so much a bracket. It was more of just we narrowing it down. And then we decided that the X-Men animated series had the greatest theme song. And that is, again, reason why you should not skip it. Not only that, but there are a ton of Easter eggs in the opening sequence of X-Men 97.
I'm also pretty sure that the second best theme song was Sailor Moon, if I remember right.
Go back and listen to that episode so that you can understand that reference. But we're going to go ahead and jump into this one because we might have a lot to discuss here as we go. But I'm going to start by asking Bethany, what was your history with the original X-Men animated series from the 90s?
I'm pretty sure I remembered watching a few episodes. I definitely think my cousin Joey had, and he lived with us, so he had the Super Nintendo game, and I think I remembered playing that with him, or playing that when he let me, and that was kind of my experience. I don't think it was something I watched frequently, but it was definitely something I have a memory of seeing, and definitely the theme song, hearing it.
Yeah. Again, greatest theme song from a superhero show of all time. So, of course, the question is, when it comes to X-Men 97, because this is a continuation, the original series aired from 92 to 97, 5 seasons, 76 episodes. And so the question is do you have to watch the original series? Short answer,
no.
No. Yeah, no, you don't. If you go back and think about it, the original series, when it first aired its first episodes, the X-Men were already an established team. There's really no origin,
right?
Other than Jubilee. Jubilee kind of gets an origin in that, but you just learn things along the way. It's essentially
kind of like a soap opera a little bit,
yeah,
where you can just jump in at any time, and you might go wait, who is this? And then eventually they explain it, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. Or
even more fitting, it's like a comic book. You just
those.
You pick up an already established comic book. Clearly there's already established characters. You might even be in the middle of a storyline, but they do a great job in the writing to get you caught up, for you to figure things out.
Without it being boring for the people who have been watching or reading since the beginning.
However, I will go through a few episodes that I wrote down. If you are a person who would like to go through and watch some of the original series, just to see what it was like, and maybe get you a little bit more or better prepared if you have not started watching X-Men 97. And of course, that starts with the first 2 episodes, which were the premiere. It's called Night of the Sentinels, episodes 1 and 2. So it's a part 1 and a part 2. And that just introduces your team, gets you some major plot points about characters, about what the story was going to be like, and all of that. Then episode 3, which is Enter Magneto, of course, establishes Magneto as their main villain.
Right.
So that's a good one. Days of Future Past, I will always recommend. It's a great storyline. Of course, introduces Bishop, who is now as a main member of the team in this X-Men 97. But that is a 2 episode. That's episode 11 and 12 from season 1. Then you've got the season finale of season 1, episode 13, called The Final Decision. This is where it continues the story of the Sentinels and that storyline deals with the fact that mutants are human.
Can I ask maybe a dumb question really quick?
Sure.
What is a Sentinel?
So the Sentinel are the giant robots.
Okay.
You remember in the first episode of X-Men 97, the giant robots that they fought? Those are the Sentinels.
Yeah, but what's their deal?
To track down and capture or other mutants.
Got it.
So they're pretty much what Trask is the guy who created them. And then there's Senator Kelly, which, again, like I said, this gets into all of that. Then we get into season 2. The first 2 episodes there, again, Till Death Do Us Part. That's where Mr. Sinister is introduced. And we get to learn what happened to Morph. So going back to the original 2 episodes from the season 1, the character of Morph is presumably killed by a Sentinel. We then get to find out in season 2 what happened to Morph, which of course will lead to the fact that Morph is a main character in this new X-Men 97.
Right.
So we get a little bit more about Morph in that one. Episode 3 is called Whatever It Takes. That's, again, continues Morph's story. So that's why those episodes are kind of important to know what Morph went through. Then we've got episodes 7 and 8, which is called Time Fugitives. I added this one because it focuses on a virus, which, if you've seen 97, we'll talk a little bit about it some more. There's the virus that Sinister leaves with Jean and Scott, of course, not Jean, but these, gives to their baby. So there's a little bit of that. That's why I added that. Then you got the Phoenix Saga, which is, I will say, most of season 3. I think there's only like maybe 4-6 episodes of season 3 that's not about the Phoenix Saga.
Yeah.
The key ones to watch there, if you don't want to watch all of season 3, would be episode 7 and episode 17. That gives you a little bit of the Phoenix Saga and a good chunk of the Dark Phoenix Saga. But that gives you a huge part of Jean Grey's character, which is a main focus of these first couple of episodes.
Right.
I'm trying to go through these pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Then we jump to season 4, and episodes 3 and 4 are called Sanctuary. This is where Magneto creates a mutants-only colony on an asteroid. And so, again, that of where Magneto is trying to work with the human and mutant relations and how his, what his mindset and plan is.
Right.
Then episode 6 is called Courage. That's, again, Morph's story. So continuing that. Episodes 18 through 21 are a storyline called Beyond Good and Evil. That's just a great overall story.
Yeah.
So if you want to go back and watch a really good story. And jump into season 5, the final season. Episode 9 is called Descent. That gives you the origin of Mr. Sinister, who, again, appears to be playing a big part in this series. And then, of course, you got the final episode, the series finale of the original series, season 5, episode 10, which is called Graduation Day. And this is where you see what happens to Professor X. And so that, of course, then sets up X-Men 97 because this is, like I said, a continuation.
You should definitely release this guide on Facebook or TikTok or in your show notes or something. I think this would be really helpful. Because I know, after I watched the first 4 episodes, I was like, I really want to go back. Yeah. Not because I'm lost or anything, but I would like to go back and watch highlights and kind of get a more complete story.
So I will say this. Disney themselves, Marvel Disney, actually released a video. I don't know how long it is. It's a few minutes long, in which they essentially do show you quick highlights of the entire series.
Right.
They do a previously on X-Men, and then they
spend 5 minutes telling you.
It honestly is, I think, a 5-minute video. So that one, you can find that on YouTube. It's a pretty good one. There's also other where people have taken the series, taken just the key moments, and have spliced together their own little kind of vignette that might be a hour and a half long.
Yeah.
But it pretty much goes through the entire series, all 5 seasons, all 76 episodes. So yeah, you can find those on YouTube if you look for them. But yeah, I can post this list as part of the show notes. But now we make it to X-Men 97, which was released just a couple of weeks ago on March 20th. They released the first 2 episodes, and then they are releasing them weekly. So as of this recording, they have just released the 4th episode, which does have a part 1, the to be continued. So
we realized as we started the episode.
Yeah, but it is what it is. But let's go ahead and jump into the characters as we always do. And we'll start off with Cyclops, voiced by Ray Chase. Now, he is replacing Norm Spencer, who unfortunately passed away in 2020. Oh. But He
sounds great. He does a good job.
You're not going to really know a difference too much there. Then we've got Jean Grey, voiced by Jennifer Hale, who is replacing Catherine Disher. However, Catherine Disher is still a part of the show. She is now the voice of Dr. Valerie Cooper, who is the head of the UN committee that is dealing with the mutants.
The blonde lady.
Yeah. Then you got Aurora Monroe, a.k.a. Storm, who is voiced by Allison Seeley Smith, who was the original voice of Storm. So she's
so interesting.
I always loved her voice.
Her voice is great. And then the way they've animated her and the way they've kind of got her arc set up so far, it's just been real. The moment, I don't want to skip too much ahead, but something happens to her and she has this moment where she realizes
I mean, we're just gonna go ahead and give a spoiler alert here. We're gonna spoil probably some stuff of these first 4 episodes, so we'll go ahead and knock that out here. So you can say, I mean, she loses her powers.
Yeah, so she loses her powers, and she's told it's gonna be permanent. And just like the moment, and it's like you see it in her face, and yes, it's animated, but it's so like you know exactly what that character is,
and you can hear it in her voice. Feeling. That's where the voice acting.
Yes, and then the sound of everyone else kind of gets drowned out a little bit. And I just thought that was a really powerful moment.
Yeah. I mean, when she says, I can't feel the breeze, that's a very powerful moment.
Yeah.
Then we've got Logan, aka Wolverine, voiced by Cal Dodd, who is a continuation from the original series. Such an iconic voice of Wolverine there. I mean, I've talked about in the past how when I read a Batman comic, I hear Kevin Conroy's voice.
Right.
I mean, Allison Seeley Smith is who I hear when I read Storm. Cal Dodd is who I hear when I read Wolverine. Norm Spencer, the original Cyclops, is who I hear when I hear a lot of these voice actors when I'm reading an X-Men comic.
Right.
Then we've got Morph, voiced by J.P. Karlak. Now, he is replacing Ron Rubin. However, again, Ron Rubin did not leave. He is now the voice of President Kelly.
Oh.
So again, Senator Kelly from the original series. Also, those of you who know the movie, there was Senator Kelly.
So is it just their voices have aged to where it wouldn't sound right?
That's part of it, I think, is that, they felt that their voice just wasn't right, or they were old enough in age that they were like, this isn't something I want to do.
I don't want to make this my life.
I want to do it. There are some others which we'll get into that had other reasons. We got Rogue, voiced by Lenore Zahn, same voice from the 90s. Hank McCoy, Beast, voiced by George Buza, again, same voice. Then we've got Gambit, voiced by AJ Locascio. Now he is replacing Chris Potter, but Chris Potter is still on the show. He will be voicing Cable. We haven't officially been introduced to Cable.
Yeah.
But he is voicing Cable. Now.
You told me we've met Cable.
Yes. Now, Cable was in the original series. So this is funny. We got Gambit. The original Gambit voice actor has been replaced. He's now playing Cable, who is replacing Lawrence Bain. But Lawrence Bain was the voice of Executioner, the guy who shot Storm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so even though there's a bunch of replacing here, all of those original actors are now just voicing somebody else.
Out. They're just doing other things.
Then we've got Jubilee, voiced by Holly Cho. She is replacing Allison Court, who stepped away because Allison Court is Canadian, and she wanted an Asian American actress to have the role.
Oh, well, that's good for her. That's awesome.
Now, this one I wanted to point out. You know Allison Court. She's Lunette the Clown from Big Comfy Couch. Yeah. So I didn't know if you knew that, but she was the original voice of Jubilee.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm having a nerd moment.
Now I will go ahead and point out she did not completely step away. She was in the most recent episode. She is the voice of, and I'm not 100% I'm going to pronounce this name right. Absissa, who was the older Jubilee inside the video game.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, that was Allison Court's voice.
Cute.
So she did still voice quote unquote Jubilee. but just the older version. We then have Bishop, who has joined the team, voiced by Isaac Robinson Smith. He is replacing Philip Aiken, and Philip Aiken is the only one I could not find out anything about why he's not voicing it, and he's not voicing any other person. So couldn't find anything else. And then, of course, our other main character here is Magneto, voiced by Matthew Watterson, who is replacing David Hemblin, who also sadly passed away in 2020. So those are all our characters. So let's talk about them for a second. But first I will ask, who do you want to see again? And who do you wish would be replaced?
Oh, no. So, okay. I want more of they're hinting at it. I know it's coming, but I'm enjoying the like weird love triangle thing that's going on between Gambit, Rogue, and Magneto.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit more later.
I'm interested to see where that's going. I'm enjoying Gambit's character. He's funny. I also like Morph. He's fun to watch, and we haven't gotten a ton of focus on him. Oh gosh, who do I want replaced?
It doesn't have to be somebody that I named. I mean, if you think of another character,
honestly, Dr. Cooper, just because she's getting on my nerves. She's a bad guy-ish.
Yeah, see, I think even though hasn't been a bad guy, I do think she will be a bad guy.
She's been a person of authority who seems to have the X-Men's the X-Men's well-being in mind, but at the same time, she also seems more interested in voting, like voter approval.
Yeah.
And I feel like if there's enough bad press on the X-Men, she will turn on them.
Yeah.
And I don't want that. That sounds bad. So I don't want that to happen.
I agree. Now, one person that I didn't include in this list is our newest character.
Yeah, Bruno.
Which is Roberto. AKA Sunspot. He has been introduced. I'll be honest, right now he's a character I'm going, we could really just do without, because he hasn't served much of a purpose.
Yeah, I could see that. He did have, his character was kind of interesting in the first episode. And then also in the episode that's kind of like the mini-sode featuring Jubilee. But other than that, he hasn't, I don't know. I'm interested to see where they're going with that. But he hasn't done much just yet.
Yeah, so he's voiced by Guy Agustini. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Who is a Brazilian-born actor. So again, sticking with that, having a voice actor who is of a similar ethnicity to the actual character. But yeah, that's why I didn't mention him. I mean, he kind of replaces the Jubilee character as the new young member.
Yeah. It's kind of like the audience's surrogate to where you can explain things to him.
And they've given him this thing where he is a mutant. He knows he's a mutant, but he's trying to hide the fact that he's a mutant.
It's like he's in the closet.
Because his family is a very renowned family.
Right.
And he doesn't want to look bad and put shame and all of that. And they might develop a little bit more, but so far in the first 4 episodes, he's only in 3 of them. He wasn't in episode 3.
And in the second episode, he wasn't in it a ton.
Yeah. And then in the first episode, he's really he's there with Jubilee, but he's not really necessary to the story. So that's where I would kind of place that. But yeah, I'm interested to see where they go with the Magneto story. But right now, Storm is where I want to focus on in that story. And I didn't mention the voice actor of Forge. I didn't write his name down. But he's only been in a couple of episodes. Gil Birmingham is his name. So, well, we've got Forge coming in, and they're following a storyline there. Gil Birmingham is Comanche, and Forge is supposed to be Cheyenne Indian, but they still have a Native American there.
What seems to be the problem, pal?
There's just so much pain in the world, so many issues. I don't think I can bear it.
Hell, friendo, it sounds like you could use a dose of pop culture roulette.
Pop culture roulette? What's that? Some sort of pop culture themed podcast or something?
That's right, sonny boy. When hope seems far, dive into some PCR.
But I already get my entertainment news from Variety.
Huh, that's pretty good. If you're a chucklehead, PCR gives you news you need, condensed, unfiltered, and raw, from three nerds who know a little something about something.
Wow, okay, sign me up.
That's the spirit. Pop Culture Roulette. New episodes every Monday, available on all major podcast directories.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into, I guess we'll call this the moving panels. I'm going to be perfectly honest. Whoever is behind this show, the screenwriters, the producers, the showrunners, whoever, man, they are studying their comics.
Yeah.
And they are putting Easter eggs galore into these episodes.
That's going to be awesome for you.
Yeah, it's way more than I can talk about in this episode. So we're not going to hit everything. So if there's something that you're like, oh, but they had this. Yeah, okay, fine. They had that. But we're not gonna make this a really long episode. But one of my favorite things has been each episode they have changed the opening.
Right.
So the episode number 1 is almost a straight recreation of the 90s show, just with the new animation. Very little, I think maybe a couple of things, but very little is different. Of course, they have to throw in Bishop and Morph, but very little has changed. Then at the end of episode 1, you find out that Magneto is now taking over the X-Men. So in episode 2, they now add Magneto right before Cyclops and give him his special name intro. Then
those name intros just are the coolest.
They
thing.
are.
They're
Again, this
so
is
cool.
one of the greatest openings to a cartoon ever. Then at the end of episode 2, we learn about the duplicate of Jean. And so in episode 3's opening, we get Jean Grey. If you pay attention in the first 2 episodes, Jean Grey has long, free-flowing hair. Then in the 3rd episode, after the reveal has happened, we get Jean with a ponytail in the opening to indicate the 2 different Jean Greys. Then in the 4th episode, and they start changing some of the other scenes throughout. I mean, it's, again, subtle things. I'm just focused on one big change that's made. But in the 4th episode, they recreate the scene where Jubilee is being chased by a mob and she runs towards a fence. Really quick scene. But they replace Jubilee with Roberto. Because again, like I said, I think he is, he is the new Jubilee. Because that's what the first episode really is. I mean, they do a very similar thing to the first episode of the original series. In the first episode of the original series, we're introduced to Jubilee. Jubilee then is attacked by Sentinels because she is a mutant, although she just found out, or she's just finding out that she's a mutant. And the X-Men come to save her. So really, the original series starts off as, like you said, it's Jubilee is the audience, is the viewer. Everything is from her point of view. We know as much as Jubilee knows.
Right.
In this show, it starts off and you get that same feel, but it's Roberto. But
I think that's so necessary for shows like that because you need somebody. It doesn't make sense for, Jean Grey to have to explain stuff to Cyclops.
Yeah.
And things like that. So it's an easy wait, what? And then you got just a quick line of dialogue. It makes sense as a viewer, and it helps the viewer know what's going on.
That's where you get a lot of your exposition is them,
and the world building.
Yeah, them having to explain things to Roberto is the way they're also explaining it to the audience.
Right.
Yeah. I will point out the big moment of episode 1, which many people saw in the trailer that Disney Plus dropped before the show, and that was when Gambit charges Wolverine's claws. When Wolverine is running, Gambit jumps on his back and then charges up his claws, and then Wolverine jumps through a Sentinel.
Because that's what Wolverine needs, is to be deadlier.
Well, so the question has been, it was all over the internet, could he actually do that? Like, because Gambit's whole ability is he kinetically charges something to the point that it explodes. So if he charges the claws, essentially he would be charging Wolverine's entire skeleton. And yes, Wolverine has a healing factor, but wouldn't it still explode? Like, wouldn't Wolverine still explode from the inside? And I did find that he has threatened Wolverine before in the comics. It was back in August of 2004 in Ultimate X-Men number 50. Gambit actually does grab one of his claws and explains his power to Wolverine. And you do see the claws start to glow, but then Wolverine backs off and retracts his claws, which I'm assuming Gambit lessens the power or something. But he threatens to blow him up, says he will blow him up.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. And so it still begs the question, like, would that actually work the way that it works in the show?
Maybe he didn't like fully charge it. It was like half charge. Just enough to create some static electricity.
Because I mean, the man is known for just charging playing cards, pieces of paper and using them as weapons. So imagine charging a entire adamantium skeleton. Again, not to say Wolverine wouldn't survive it, but
he just would be mad at Gambit.
He wouldn't be happy.
It would also not be helpful in a fight situation.
I don't think I mentioned the title of episode 1 is To Me, My X-Men, which is, I just love that that's the title because, that was the big, that was like the Avengers Assemble for the X-Men. It was To Me, My X-Men. So I just love that. Then we've got episode 2, which is called Mutant Liberation Begins. And in this, now, episode 1 ends with the big shock that Magneto, according to Charles Xavier's will, he has left everything to Magneto. Magneto now has control of the school, and he is now in charge of the X-Men. Of course, they don't trust him.
Well, like, you could maybe question Xavier's mental capacity.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of it. I will say, in the Age of Apocalypse storyline from the 90s, maybe 90s, they do play with this as well. Because in that one, it's like an alternate reality where Charles died before he created the X-Men. And Magneto, instead of becoming the villain, he essentially creates the X-Men and he is the leader of the X-Men. So they have played with that before. But in this episode, Magneto is arrested or detained or whatever you want to call, and he's brought before a tribunal of the UN, a court, essentially. And this is actually very similar to the comics. In Uncanny X-Men number 200 in September of 1985, Magneto is on trial. And it plays out almost the exact same. Magneto ends up helping people in the course of that. And the judge sees that Magneto truly is changed and there is humanity in him, and decides to give him another chance. And so he is released just like he is in this one. And funny enough, that episode ends with Professor X having a heart attack. And he is taken into space to save his life by Ileandra, who that's the same thing that's happened in this series. And so, but before he leaves, he actually asks Magneto to take over the school and lead the X-Men. So, again, whoever's doing this show knows their comics.
Good. Because I can think of many people who would point it out if they didn't.
Yeah. The big bad, I guess you would say, in this episode is the Executioner, who is an actual character from Uncanny X-Men Annual number 17 in 1993. He is, just like in the show, he's a human who wants to kill mutants, and he is using tech from other mutant villains that he's acquired. They specifically kind of show the Sentinel stuff that this guy's collecting. And then he gets the dampeners, the collars, and then they make the gun.
Which we've seen the dampener on Bruno. Nope. Why do I keep
Roberto.
calling Roberto?
Yeah.
We keep seeing, we saw that on him earlier.
Now, I don't think they said his name in X-Men 97, but in the comic books, it's revealed that he is a FBI field agent by the name of Carl Denty. In the show, it kind of just plays like he's just one of the Friends of Humanity members.
Right.
I don't think they named him, but I could be wrong. And then, of course, the big shocking moment at the end that we've already talked about, Storm losing her powers, which, again, happened in the comics.
And it's a very emotional because you've just heard her, like, she's just been talking with Jean because Jean is pregnant, and her and Scott have decided that they're going to leave the school and start a life of their own and try to just be normal people and raise their child. And she has this moment with Storm, and Storm is talking about how she wishes, you know, she has had thoughts of what if I had not been born a mutant, but this is where my family is. And it's just this very sweet,
and she
emotional.
calls Jean her sister.
Yeah, Jean is her sister. It's a very emotional, just precious moment between the two. And you get that connection. And you also see how important having that power and being connected to these people is to her. And then by the end of the episode, for all of that to be taken away, it really like ramps up that emotion. It's just really good writing.
Yeah.
And acting.
Yeah. And again, that happened in the comics, Uncanny X-Men number 185 from June of 1984. In that one, though, it's not the Executioner. It's actually Henry Gyrich who fires the weapon, who is the guy they go and visit in prison.
Okay. The guy who killed Xavier.
Yeah, supposedly killed Xavier.
Laramy's a doubter.
Well, no. I mean, it's pretty much known that Xavier's not dead.
Yeah.
But in the comic, he is actually trying to shoot Rogue. And then Storm actually pushes Rogue out of the way, and then she gets hit by the blast. But the same thing that happened, we then find out in episode 4 about that Forge is responsible for the dampener. Mm-hmm. In the comic, he's actually responsible for the gun.
Oh, wow.
Like, he actually built a prototype, and then they're using that prototype. Gyrich is using the prototype. In the cartoon, it's just that they took his idea of the dampener, and then they've made weapons out of it.
Right.
So they kind of make Forge not as responsible in the comic, but it is what it is. Then we'll jump into episode 3, which is titled Fire Made Flesh. This is where we start to see the Rogue Magneto relationship. There is it
is so weird, but
yeah, there's a moment where Morph is checking who has the danger room.
Yeah, that part's kind of creepy.
And it's just Rogue and Magneto like over and over and over again.
And it's to mess with Gambit.
Yeah.
Like, Morph is really playing on Gambit's insecurity about the two of them and having a relationship.
Yeah. And he even says, wow, they're really working on their stamina. And so, yeah. So little thing in there for the adults that watched the show as a kid who are watching it. They know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But the actual relationship between Rogue and Magneto, that has been something that has happened here and there throughout the comics. The first indication that I found was Uncanny X-Men number 269 in August of 1990. In that one, Magneto saves Rogue after she loses her powers, and she has the ability to touch because she doesn't have her powers anymore. And that kind of is what develops
Leads
their
to
relationship because of her being able to touch him and then him being her savior. And this was during Chris Claremont's run, which is a famous run. In fact, they go to the Savage Land, I believe it is, and they actually dress like they're in the Savage Land. So wearing more like loincloth type stuff, which when Gambit is having his hallucination in this episode, he sees them.
Oh, yeah.
And they're dressed very similar to that panel from that comic from Uncanny X-Men 269. But in the comic, that version of their relationship doesn't really nothing really comes out of it because Chris Claremont then left, and when they rebooted the series with Jim Lee, just like a year later, they just acted like none of that.
Yeah.
And they went straight to the Rogue and Gambit relationship.
I will say I like the idea of, like, Rogue is this person who can't touch anyone, and Gambit's power comes from being able to touch things, and just kind of the dynamic between the two of them. And they've also got that weird accent, both of them. But their relationship's really cute. I'm interested to see, like, how it's going to develop, if it's going to be something where Gambit really just ruins it for himself.
Yeah.
But I like those characters. They're interesting. They're, like, the fact that their love for each other, but also the hangups that they have regarding their powers. It's a cute relationship.
Well, and like I said, they've played around with it throughout the comics. Again, I mentioned the Age of Ultron storyline, or not Age of Ultron, Age of Apocalypse storyline, in which it's an alternate universe, alternate reality. And in that reality, Magneto and Rogue are a couple. And they actually explain how they're able to touch because Magneto has some sort of magnetic field that he places just over him, so that when she kisses him or touches him, or
she's not actually touching him.
Yeah. So they kind of explain it that way. And then there's still a little bit of the love triangle with Gambit as well in that story.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really play out all that much.
I'm just glad we never saw that with Ian McKellen and Anna Paquin.
Yeah. That could have been weird. They did another version of it in September of 1995. In X-Men number 46, they introduced a character named Joseph, who was actually a clone of Magneto. And he and Rogue develop a relationship. A couple years later, in Uncanny X-Men number 341, Joseph gives Rogue a Christmas gift, which is this object that can nullify her powers. So it doesn't remove them, but just prevents her powers from activating at the moment. And they kiss.
Very cute.
But that doesn't last very long, because 2 years after that, Joseph sacrifices himself in X-Men number 87 in April of 1999. And so no more Joseph. So that relationship lasted like 4 years.
Wow.
In the comics. But again, that wasn't technically Magneto. It was a
Joseph.
clone of Magneto who was, younger version.
Yeah.
And again, they did it again in the X-Men Legacy comics, but that ends as soon as Magneto proposes, because Rogue just declines.
She's like, nah, mate.
Yeah. The other big thing that happens in episode 3 is the reveal of Madeline Pryor, who is the clone of Jean Grey. They do it a little different, though. So in the comics, she debuted in Uncanny X-Men number 168 in April of 1983. She is a creation of Chris Claremont, as I mentioned earlier. But she is Madeline Pryor. When Scott meets her, her name is Madeline Pryor.
Okay.
The only reason Scott has an interest in her is because he thinks she favors Jean.
Interesting.
Now, she is a clone of Jean.
You know who you look like. It's wild. I know.
So this for those of you who don't know your timelines well enough, this is right at the end of the Phoenix Saga in the comics. So Jean Grey has, quote unquote died. No one ever says dead in comics. She has died from being the Phoenix. She sacrifices herself at the end of that storyline. And they explain that a part of the Phoenix, because it has to have a host, so a part of the Phoenix that didn't perish with Jean actually finds itself inside of Madeline Pryor.
Okay.
Because since she is a clone, and she is a clone created by Mr. Sinister.
That was what I was going to ask. Like, why was she made?
He is a clone created by Mr. Sinister. And I think there's even he I think names her Pryor because it's like a joke to him.
Yeah. It was a joke to me. I made the same joke.
Yeah. But they get married, but again, he doesn't think he's marrying Jean. he's marrying Madeline
He
Pryor.
knows she's another
Yes.
person.
And she gets pregnant. That's 1985 when that happens. And then they do something very similar. They have their child, which is Nathaniel, Nate. He is infected. It's by Apocalypse in the comic, not Sinister. And then he's taken 2,000 years into the future to try to save his life. Of course, he will then become Cable, who I'm sure we'll see later in the 97 series, especially since, like I said, they've already mentioned that one of the actors is playing him. The whole Goblin Queen that she becomes almost immediately in the show, that didn't happen until years later. She actually went through a couple of other phases before she became the Goblin Queen. And I want to say the Goblin Queen was a short run for her as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole thinking she was Jean Grey, that didn't happen in the comics, at least to my knowledge. Yeah. I will still say I've said this before, I'm not the biggest Marvel person as I am with DC. And we are talking about, 60 years worth of comics here since X-Men debuted in 63. So yeah, there may be some storylines that I didn't pick up on, but yeah, we got that. Other little Easter egg I did want to point out is at one point when Morph is talking about Sinister and what Sinister did to him, he does shift his look to what he looked like in the original series. Because of course they have made it to where he's more
almost like a blank canvas.
Yeah. He's just a white, bald, I guess the best way to describe it, almost alien looking.
Right.
He doesn't have a true form is essentially what they're showing here, but he does shift back to the look that he had from the original series at one point, and I thought that was fun.
Yeah.
All right, then we got our most recent episode, which I will say was strange at first, because this one's got two stories in it. So the first half is a storyline called Motendo, which is a story with Mojo, who many might remember from the original series, who just like he is in the comics, he is a other dimensional being who likes to play games on his world, and he typically uses heroes, mainly X-Men, to help with his ratings and all of that. The video game that they use in this actually resembles the classic Konami game.
The game that I'm pretty sure I played. Yeah,
you said, though, you played it on Super Nintendo. From my research, I found that version of the game only existed on Sega.
Okay.
So...
Well, maybe it was when we rented a Sega from Blockbuster.
Maybe.
But
this was the classic arcade game. I know I played the arcade game a lot. But yeah, the cartridge that is sitting inside of the Motendo, it does have the same look as the Sega Genesis game, the design with Wolverine and the reddish color there. So there's a little Easter egg. There's another one right as before she notices the Motendo, but I'll let Eagle Eye viewers find that one. I'll just tell you it's a little doll sitting on her counter. Then when they get into the game, when it goes into like the 8-bit, there is a great Days of Future Past callback to the Wanted poster from that famous cover. So I wanted to throw that one in. Then you've got Abscissia, who again, not sure if I'm pronouncing that. And I rewatched to see if they say this name in the episode, and I don't think they did.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever said this name. But this is a character from the comics. However, drastically different.
Yeah.
So in the comic, she appeared in Wolverine 52 in January of 1992. And just like in this episode, she is Jubilee. But she is Jubilee from another reality.
Oh, so
not just a computer programmed version. Yeah.
She kind of is a Jubilee from another reality. Although not really a reality.
So in the comic, in this story, Jubilee, Mojo has captured Jubilee, and he gives her this like deal of she becomes his slave, and he would undo something, or I forgot exactly what it was. Jubilee refuses. He then reveals that Abscissia is another version of her, and it's one from another reality who actually agreed to be Mojo's slave so that she would save, other people. And that's about it. I mean, that character is lifeless, vacant in expression. There's really nothing to it. In fact, then later in the story, when Jubilee ultimately does refuse Mojo's plan, she just like poofs away. Abscissia just kind of poofs away, and she's never seen again in the comics. So I did like that this one at least gave her some sort of a character.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as soon as she reveals herself, you're like, oh yeah, I could see how that was Jubilee.
Yeah. Now, we may never see her again because I don't know if you noticed, once Jubilee defeats Mojo, she digitized away.
Yeah.
So she may be gone. That may have just been a one and done character as well. Then the second half of this episode is called Life Death Part 1. So we'll get Part 2
next week.
Yeah. With the next episode, but we got Life Death Part 1. This is where Forge is trying to help Storm get her powers back, and we discover it's because he feels guilty.
Yeah.
Because he was part of the reason why this happened to her. We then also get revealed that he has fallen in love with Storm, which made me go, how long have they been
I know, right?
together?
Well, I mean, she's got those really cool overalls.
Yeah.
And so who wouldn't fall in love with somebody with cool overalls like she had?
So he does they try Forge's quote unquote cure. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then there's this really kind of psychedelic moment where you think that Storm's kind of hallucinating, but then you find out Forge is also in this hallucination.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they are attacked by a character from the comics called the Adversary, who first appeared in Uncanny X-Men number 188 in September of 1984. Now, in the comic, this is a character connected with Forge. Forge was once a Cheyenne shaman, and he had been trained since birth to combat the Adversary, the demon. When he gave up being a shaman and then joined the military and fought in Vietnam, his entire group were killed. He then performs a dark magic, black magic, whatever you want to call it, spell from his knowledge as being a shaman. And he opens a portal that releases demons, including the Adversary, who then kill everyone who killed his team.
Oh, no.
So, we didn't see the outcome here. We did see the Adversary bite Forge, and there was some sort of reaction that happened. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. If they do, in fact, make the same connection that Forge is responsible for the Adversary. Because that could only add to his guilt.
How many more things can he be responsible for?
So I will say there's a fun Easter egg where they show a picture of X Factor, Forge's group from the comics, main group from the comics. Yeah. So there is a little Easter egg there. Like I said, there are a ton of Easter eggs. I know I am not able to hit them all. So I just wanted to hit a few things. And like I said, we didn't get all of that story. So me talking about the Adversary is about as much as I can tell you about that life-death story. We will get part 2 in the 5th episode. But we're pretty much halfway through the series. And if you haven't given it a look, let's find out whether Bethany and I think you should. So let's get into our final decision. Bag it, stack it, or trade it. We'll group all 4 of the episodes, just talk about, is this something that should be watched? So Bethany, I will let you go first.
So I think I'm going to give out a rare rating for me. I don't give this rating out lightly, and I don't give it out often. And I'm gonna say I'm gonna bag it. It's very well written. Even for somebody like me who's not familiar with the comics, who isn't gonna appreciate all of those Easter eggs. I love the story of the X-Men. I've always enjoyed the movies. And this cartoon, it's interesting. It's such an updated story. Oh man, it's so well written. It's well acted. It's well animated. It's definitely worth your time.
Yeah, I'm at a bag it too. Again, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the series plays out. But yeah, for someone like me It's great nostalgia. I even told Bethany as it aired, even though Disney Plus drops the episodes on Wednesday, I said, no, I'm going to watch it Saturday morning, like God intended. But like Bethany also said, it's a great introduction for new viewers who weren't fans of the original series. I would say, as we kind of alluded to earlier, it might even make some people want to go back and watch the original series.
It definitely made me want to go back. Because in 97, I turned 9 that November. So even if I did watch it more than I remember, I was too young to really remember it.
Yeah, you were 4 when the series premiered.
Started.
But again, if you aren't, like we said earlier, it's like picking up a new comic. It might take you a little while to get into it, but it's well written. It won't take long for you to figure out what's going on. You'll get to know the characters. Again, they didn't introduce us to the characters in the first series. We had to get to know them.
Yeah.
If you even go back and listen to when I gave the recommendations, they introduced Sinister, and it's not until like 2 seasons later that they actually give his origin.
Right.
So, and they did that with some of the others. I remember there's episodes about Rogue before she became an X-Men. So there's a lot of that. It does a great job with it, and I'm looking forward to see how the rest of this season plays out, and hopefully we'll get more.
I'm excited. I've enjoyed it. Even Ruby was really into it when she was sitting there with us. She was like, "Oh, what's happening? What's going on with this?" And Lily was excited to see Jubilee.
Yeah, because she makes fireworks.
She makes fireworks.
She thinks that's a cool power.
It is a cool power. So I feel like. Yeah.
And again, like I said, I can't mention all the Easter eggs, but Mojo name drops Dazzler, who I then point out to Ruby and Bethany who Dazzler is and how she's a pop star in the comics who is a mutant. And that there has been talk that if she appears in an actual movie, she should be played by Taylor Swift.
I just don't know when Taylor Swift would have the time.
Yeah. But like I said, I can't, again, hit everything that could be connected with the comics. This just goes so deep, but that's what makes it so good. But we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. Again, episode 5 will come out in just a couple of days, so you can get caught up and start watching along with us, and maybe we'll come back once the season ends and talk about the rest of the episodes. But we'll wrap things up today. Rate and review the show, and as always, we appreciate you for listening. Before today, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
Brian Hunter.